Robert Downey Jr. is here. He's one of Hollywood's most talented actors. He starred in films such as Less Than Zero, Natural Born Killers, and Shortcuts. In 1993, he earned an Academy Award nomination for Chaplin. In the year 2000, he won a Golden Globe for his role in Ally McBeal. His new movie is The Singing Detective. It is a film version of Dennis Potter's celebrated British miniseries. Here is the trailer to welcome Robert Downey Jr. back to this table. Welcome back.
Thank you.
It's good to see you.
Likewise.
This is the first thing you've done since you've been back.
Correct.
This was a movie also that took, what, a long time to get made. Everybody wanted, was chasing, as they say, I guess, in Hollywood, chasing the script. Or chasing the property, or...
Yeah. By the time I knew anything about it, Mel came by where I was staying, and he dropped off these tapes, and he said, have a look, you might like them.
Yeah, this was The Singing Detective.
The Singing Detective, it was the British series.
Did he just walk in and leave it and say, here it is, I want you to take a look at it, goodbye, see you later?
Basically.
He didn't stop and say, I'm here for dinner and let's talk, and he
no.
just...
No, and, you know, it's not mysterious that he's kind of like that, because he's, you know, good, bad, or indifferent. This is a feeling I have that this would be of interest to you. You might find some parallels. It's not my business if you don't. And then he split. And we were talking about it over time, and I realized that it was a strong suggestion from not just a peer and an artist and a director and an actor and a producer, but from a friend. So,
tell me what you think he meant. I mean, the parallels in terms of the character's life and your life, parallels in terms of he thought this was good for you because as an actor he thought you needed a property to get back on your feet.
Equal parts of both, and then in the usual Gibsonian style, he acts as though he doesn't mean anything by anything, which is great.
You can take it whatever you want to, give it as much weight as not.
Yeah, the twinkle in the eye wouldn't mean much if he was serious about it, you know. So.
You found parallels.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's obvious,
right?
As you've said.
Well, you know what? The obvious
tell me
stuff.
what's obvious. I mean, tell me who Don Dark is and what you called on to make this work so well.
Dan Dark is Dennis Potter.
Right.
Dennis Potter was an artist who struggled with a disease, sometimes gracefully, sometimes less than gracefully. He was someone who worked throughout the course of his life, no matter what was going on with his body, his physical state. And I can relate to that, and I think he's someone who, quite in spite of himself, developed a sense of optimism, not being a dirty word, towards the end of his life. And I think that that's a gift, you know. You know. I mean, Potter's he's not revered because he's fabulous and deep and a wordsmith. He was someone who really
was
put it out
authentic
there.
And honest.
That's that word I keep forgetting.
Yeah, that's it.
Authentic.
Yeah, that's what he was. And he did this famous interview with Michael Bragg, now Lord Melvin Bragg, Melvin Bragg, which everybody thought was just extraordinary because he just came roaring through, you know, with sort of wisdom and authenticity and piercing honesty that made you.
And I think the fact that at the time of the interview, it was pretty clear that he was about done, you know, with his dance.
He was dying.
He was dying. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Campbell and Moyers.
Oh, sure. Because another great series, yeah.
It was
Joseph Campbell and Bill Moyers.
Yeah, it was that sense of, you know, at this point you're not faking it anymore, and you're kind of getting out your last thoughts, and you're kind of saying, the trajectory of my life has brought me here, and from this point I can say, you know, either it sucks or it's not so bad after all.
Picking up on that, Bill did a brilliant job, and Joseph Campbell talking about myth and life was at the same time. I mean, still, every time they run it on public television, it develops a whole new collection of people come to hear it, and many people want to go back and hear it because the lessons and the insights there they want to hear. But also the interesting thing about this is that, you know, listening to that and hearing and seeing the Dennis Potter interview with Bragg, I began to ask people this question, you know, if you had one last lecture to give, what would you want to say? It's hard for people to approach that, but it is the idea of you know, about the way we live our lives. On the one hand, you know, we don't think about what it is that's important until it's too late. you know, or B, and therefore we don't think about the kind of life we live, or B, we don't really get around to saying, in the end, what is it that we have really learned that's important that I can give to a larger community, whether it's just my family,
Correct.
friends, or whoever it is. And
So
a little
true.
bit of that was Tuesdays with Maury, was a little bit of the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So tell me what, if you were summing up, suppose you today, not the singing detective, but your own life, you know, what ought we learn from what you know?
Personal mythology.
Yeah.
You don't have to get stuck. My heroes, you know, who were kind of that post-war James Dean, Live Fast, Die Young, that was a period of time, and trying to do that legacy honor at the same time being intimidated by it, you jump into stuff. I mean, for me, you know, Dionysus, you know, god of ecstasy or drunkenness, what does that mean? And I think also, as long as you survive the timeline of certain myths, because it's like, there's times in my life where it was like, all right, this is your opportunity to get off this train. If you don't do it, astronomy says, not astrology.
Yeah, exactly.
Says 7 years later we'll give you another shot.
Yeah.
And you don't buy it. So you take that step into that dark corner one more time because you're dramatic or imagining that you're hurting or you're just immature or ignorant. And there you go. And it's true, the math of life is really consistent. So if you want to get off the train, you know, it's the windows of opportunity are sometimes subtle and sometimes glaring, but they're there. And it really is about fortifying yourself with enough belief that the universe actually gives a damn. And
You need that in order to... That the universe gives a damn that
well,
you...
then otherwise why show up, you
Yeah.
know? I had a philosophy which was developed over time and from other people's words about the optimist believes the future is uncertain, the pessimist is always right but doesn't care. So it's my duty to be an optimist, but clearly the pessimist has more information. Even 6 months ago, I was hell-bent on that idea of I'm going to always be right, and I don't believe the future is uncertain. And, you know, coming up on, you know, going into the 5th decade of my life, I'm 38, it's kind of time to, all right, you want to, you know, I don't want to do 38 to 45 until the next 7-year cycle gives me a
Do
shot.
you need help to come to those realizations? I mean, you got to have, do you really have to say, you know, to come to the wisdom that you eventually reached and others do? Does somebody has to help you do that, or do you, in the end, have to do it yourself, period?
The latter. And I don't want to take any credit away from the people who are largely responsible for me saying, all right, well, I make this decision, but then I don't really have any friends, or I'm not in love and nothing matters anyway, you know. Yeah, of course. I think for me it took a lot of elements that were already there but were never firing at the same time. And then falling in love helps.
A lot. There's something to live for.
Yeah.
Yeah. A whole larger thing, larger than life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me the story of Singing Detective so that an audience at home will know what we're talking about here. And the fact that Michael Gambon played it
so well.
so well.
That it was so...
Or as they say, the great Gambon.
Yes, the great Gambon. It was so definitive that at a certain point, Gordon said, don't watch it.
Don't even watch it.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
Because you're confident enough that you're not going to do what he did. Or
It's
try to do what he did.
I was wondering at certain points, even things like when he's doing it, when he's the detective and not Dan Dark with the psoriasis in the hospital, he's got a mustache as the detective. That kind of shows you that it's different, and should I do that or shouldn't I do that? And Keith was right. He goes, if you want to get into a water balloon fight with what they did, what we did, believe me, either way, it's going to seem like we did it intentionally or we didn't do it intentionally, so just forget it. But the story is essentially, as Potter said, about a man who takes up his bed and walks.
Yeah.
Which before I started was like, all right, so we're in religious mythology. That's people really are going to buy that. And by the time we were done, I had a little more faith than I did in life, and the experience of making it was great. He's hospitalized with a virulent psoriasis.
Right.
He's miserable. He's making everyone around him miserable. And he's a detective novel writer, so he's lost in this kind of cheesy novel that he wrote that nobody bought. And that he escapes into that. And pop culture, what a great, you know, escape.
Yeah.
That's what I've done on occasion. I think that's what people do. Then they say, well, we really had it with you. We're going to send you we've got a new doctor here. I said, what, zoology? And they go, no. Dr. Gibbons, I go, go further. And so they send me to him, and that's where it starts. Between the love, you don't understand why this woman would still have for him.
Right.
But she shows up, and she tells him, come on, you should write about this, about what's really happening. So the film is about saying this film isn't a film. And gradually, the worlds start to bleed together, and he kind of figures it out, and he picks up his bed and walks.
This is where the singing detective sings. Take a look. Yeah. How is this different for you as a performance than Chaplin?
There was no easy reference
To Chaplin at all.
And
yeah.
The only thing that's similar is the more you watched the resource material,
yeah.
the less likely you were to be able to imagine you could ever do it. But
The more you watched Chaplin,
oh God, are you kidding me?
the less you believed you could actually
Of course,
be him.
of course. I mean,
He was that original.
He still is. I still study his films. The great thing is the pressure's not on anymore. I mean, if I had to, all right, you know what, Chaplin's a wash, we got to reshoot it.
Okay,
like,
I don't know the history of this. Was Chaplin something that you had to do, wanted to do, were obsessed by? It wasn't the fact that somebody came to you and said, you'd be great as Chaplin, let's make a movie.
Oh, no. And again, and Attenborough, who, just turned 80, and there's this whole
yeah.
great
Sir Richard,
circle.
yes.
Lord Richard
Lord
now.
Richard, I'm sorry. Yeah,
There's this whole circle going on 20 years after
Lord
Singing
Dickey,
Detective, now 10 years after Chaplin, and he's 80, and he held up a picture of Tom Cruise and said, now isn't that a remarkable resemblance? He knew what he was doing. Then I really went for it.
Yeah, then you wanted to do it.
Yeah. Well,
Well, what do you mean?
I think that actors do the films they're meant to do on a certain level. Of course, there's bleed-throughs and there's, pilot error.
You really do?
I'm certain of it.
Why are you certain?
Because
In other words, are you saying that if it was meant to be, it would be?
Mm-hmm.
Because you would have known that you had to do it, and you would have spared no rock.
Exactly that. Even if the person who had it locked and seemed like the best choice breaks their leg and then you go and fill in, sometimes that's even it. Because out of left field, you're introduced to a subject matter and a location and a series of circumstances that if you hadn't been given the Jedi mind trick of no, you're not, now we go, you wouldn't have been able to accept it or allow it in. And it doesn't mean that it's because the experience is so deep, as usual. The experience is often mundane and rooted and simple. But,
But then does that mean that you can't look at things because of your skill that would have been perfect for you, but for whatever reason didn't happen, and say, God, whatever happened, I would have knocked that out of the park?
yeah.
You don't look at anything like that and say, that was perfect for me, and how did I ever miss it?
Well, I'm not above being a hypocrite, but
Yes.
verily I say
Or worse.
unto thee
Yeah.
that when the chips are down and you're relaxed enough to where the mind talk isn't running the show, I know it. I know it, because that's part of the deal, too. Look at what that gentleman invited into his life at that point in time, and that experience he got to have. I admire that. Chaplin always said, we're not in competition with each other, please. Then again, he didn't have any competition.
Yeah. Do you know how to explain Chaplin? I mean, how do you explain someone who's that?
He was a hard-working man who invited a time into his life where he had a training that no one else will ever be afforded again. Nobody. Carno and the way they used to do those vaudeville shows and the precision. And then he was able to have the objectivity for the first time where after all of that training, he was able to see himself on film. He'd never seen himself in the theater.
And you have learned more about the work that you do from watching Chaplin, perhaps, than any other experience.
Mm-hmm.
There's just something about the way he did it that is informative beyond everything else.
I'm not displeased with my generation. We like words and we like actions and activities and props and passages and monologues and drama and all that stuff. And if you strip all of that away and watch what he was communicating with no other instrument than his heart and his mind, and then the body was just dancing as directed. I mean, it's so transcendent, you know, it makes you want to quit.
I want to come back to this issue because it has to do with Chaplin and others. It has been my experience that the people that I admire the most, having to do with what it is they do, they're the most dedicated to it. In other words, if I've never asked anyone at this table or any other place who does something spectacularly well, whether it's hitting a baseball, painting, playing music, or being successful at business. Everybody says it's just because it has everything to do with preparation, commitment, will, you know, all those things. They never say, I'm just smarter than everybody else. You know where I'm going. Here's where I'm going.
Yeah.
It is that you said that, you know, you believe you're destined to do the films that you ought to do. Sometimes there seems to me to be people who have remarkable talent who throw it away for whatever reason. Attitude, mindset, addiction, whatever it might be.
And that's part of the picture too. You hold something, what do they say? Anything you hold too dearly will be the first thing to go.
Yeah.
Attenborough, you have to let go of your darlings, puppet.
Is that what he said?
Oh, sure.
You have to let go of your
darlings.
Your darlings.
And he meant the scene that we both wanted to keep, and, you know, Mario Casar said, that doesn't make sense, or, you know, whatever. And
Mario Casar said that to Nicky Attenborough.
Well, he probably had a point. You know, I held the false notion that I could operate on two tracks and run them both at the same time and neither would suffer. Let alone, you know, I'm not on either track. I'm just a guy who was a kid who had a certain set of experiences that gave me a predisposition to self-destruction. And there's something fabulous about that.
What is fabulous about it?
It serves some part of your soul to blow it all up. Because if you survive it, you realize that there are life-sustaining forces which you may never understand that have your back. And they're fairly forgiving. You know, even an incarceration isn't that big a deal. I'd rather go back into the California correctional system than lose a thumb. It's not that difficult, but people have their fears. And if you pioneer into an area that few of your buddies have, it's all mysterious and fearful to them, and they have night sweats when they think about it happening. You go, it ain't that deep. What's deep is evolution.
Because you have things within you that you don't know, that help you confront fear?
Sure.
Or you don't?
3.5 billion years of DNA, and we don't even want to listen.
It's great to see you back.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming. I hope we can do this again.
Sounds great.